Thank you. Hello. First of all, I want to thank Matt for the introduction. Realization was kind enough to invite me here to present my project to you. Slight variation on what Matt said. It was the building of a new factory, but it was really the creation of a new company. It was a joint venture, so new management absolutely knew everything, and we did it in 7 months, and it's twice the size of what we were before. The agenda is going to be split up into 5 little points: company background, solving our synchronization problem, implementing the 3 rules, results, and the challenges and lessons that we learned. A little bit of background on EMCO. We're the largest wire rope and wire manufacturer in Colombia and South America. Our headquarters and first plant is in Bogota. The new plant, the joint venture, is in Santa Marta, which is on the coast. It's an export platform. We currently employ about 500 people, so a little bit smaller than Siemens. But some of our customers include preformed line products, PLP, Tyco, Suncoast Post-Tension, Pemex, Ecopetrol, and Goodyear and Michelin. We are split up into 8 different sectors. The spring sector, so industrial springs, we make mattress spring wire, other industrial springs. Elevator ropes, the agri-industrial market, so we make stay cables and wires for vineyards, for example, for greenhouses. The automotive is for tires. We make bead wire, which is the tire that goes inside of the wire that goes inside of tires and reinforces the structure of tires. So Goodyear and Michelin are our customers there. We make fishing and shrimping ropes. Petroleum and mining industry. We use ropes for a variety of different applications. Electrical and telecom. We make strands and wires for conductor manufacturers, and we make guy strands, which hold towers in place, for example. And pre-stressed concrete steel wires and strands. That's one of our biggest products, which we export all over the world. Manufacturing process is relatively simple and can be, the plant manager is going to get mad at me for saying that, but it can be broken down into 3 main steps. Cleaning, which involves pickling the acid in hydrochloric acid, removes impurities and rust. Then we have drawing, which is a mechanical process which reduces the diameter of the raw material. And finally, stranding and stress relieving, which applies a constant load while you intertwine 7 wires, 19 wires, 26 wires. Depends on the construction of the final product. It's important to note that, I guess, how we got to realization. Our strategy to compete, we started 2 years ago on a viable vision implementation, which isn't realization, but it's gold rat consulting. It's applying TOC to our plant floor. So within a year, we were able to guarantee 100% due date performance. We came from 45% due date performance, and that 45%, I can tell you, was whoever yelled the loudest got product first. It was very challenging. So we increased our efficiency, and now we guarantee our due dates with 5% a day X works. 5% a day X works if I'm late. So if I'm late 3 days, it's 15% off your order. What this allows us to do in the steel industry, this is kind of unheard of. The steel industry is known, it's notorious for late deliveries. And what this has allowed us to do is to reduce our customers' final inventories. Steel is a commodity, the price fluctuates. It reduces final inventories, and for our distributors, this has allowed them to rotate their inventory up to 3 times more than when they were ordering before. So we charge a premium for emergency orders now. We are very selective of our customer base, which is, I guess, a luxury in any business. And we increase capacity with no investment. This, in some lines of production, the pre-C strand line, we increased 100% capacity. So we doubled our capacity just organizing our process flow. In our rope manufacturing, 30%. In others, 10%. But in total, the company increased its capacity from 20 to 30% without purchasing 1 machine. So it was a very successful implementation. And this project, which we did, the expansion in the free trade zone, a joint venture with a private equity fund, is where we came to realization and asked them for their help executing our vision. The importance of this project, because we were able to capitalize on our competitive advantage of delivering on time, we have a very opportunistic market, and for every month that we could get the company up and running, we would have approximately 55% more revenue. Our products, on average, have 55% throughput per unit. Delays to this project would have caused expediting additional contracting costs, having people sitting idle sometimes when you don't need them, operational issues, firefighting, as the gentleman from Siemens mentioned before, firefighting is very difficult, and we didn't have an additional management structure. There's a CEO, there's a CFO, there's a COO, and there's a president of the board, and that's it. And all these people had to manage the day-to-day activities of one company and create another company as well. Even if we brought in management, which we did along the way, we weren't prepared, and they weren't prepared to have the company handed over to them completely. We really needed to go with them every step of the way. Also, reputational effect with the banks. We were financed by local banks for this project. We had the private equity who's a partner, but we also had financing from the banks. And needless to say, if you mess up the first time when you want to grow in the future, they're a little reluctant to lend you money. So that was definitely a concern for us. It's a completely greenfield project. The implementers who were there, I think they were all a little bit surprised when they got there. There's nothing where we started the plant. There was a free trade zone set up by the government to give incentives for labor, to give subsidies so jobs would be creative. But there's nothing there. There was no gas, there was no electricity, there was no water. It was literally a farm before we got there. So it was quite a challenge. And it wasn't just the construction of the factory, but we had to hire people, train people. We had to put in the IT department. We had to do absolutely everything that we have had and which we consider normal in day-to-day operations of a company for 50 years. We had to create this from scratch using only one administrative structure, which was never designed or had the capacity to manage another company twice as big. So timelines were very aggressive, limited budget. The bank was very clear that we're going to lend you X amount of money. If you go over, that's shareholder responsibility. So we had a very tight budget. Solving our synchronization problem. As I mentioned before, we were running our current business, which in itself is a full-time job. We had to approve the designs. There's no cookie-cutter model to how you make a wire factory. So we had to venture out on our own. There hasn't been a wire factory made in the Americas from scratch, 10 to 15 years from any calculation we can manage. We had to pick all the machinery, set up a sales strategy. Obviously, going from capacity of 1 and going to 3, you need to make sure that you have a diversified client base, that you have a decisive competitive edge that makes sure that you're going to be able to place all this product. Vendor selection. In a project of this size, you have vendor from everything from stationary to machines to the transformers, which we bought from Siemens. This part was very challenging. I had to get environmental licenses. The construction permit was actually the easiest one. That one took 3 weeks. Environmental licenses, licenses to use hydrochloric acid, which is a very controlled substance in Colombia, a variety of different approvals, which some of them took up to 6 months. So we had to get started on those early. And finally, the construction which in itself was its own project. HR plan. This plant created 100 new jobs. We are one of the only high carbon drawer wire manufacturer in Colombia, so we couldn't hire anybody who had any experience making these products. There's other wire manufacturers, but in completely different fields, so it was very hard to find a plant manager who knew how to draw high carbon wire, how to strand high carbon wire. It was almost impossible to find. Implementation of the 3 rules. The first rule, we defined our full kits and we staggered them. Initially, we did this with 8 separate streams, HR, IT, some of which I'll go into later. Then we realized this was still way too much WIP. So we concentrated on 2 production lines and we did everything around these 2 production lines. One was the PC strand line and the other one was the galvanizing line. So we took 8 streams and we made them into 2 and reduced the number of tasks even further. Project plan with 3% buffer, which we later made 50% buffer. We changed the measurements around objectives. So typically in Colombia, a contractor is paid, how many bricks you laid. Okay, I was supposed to lay 200, I laid 100. Here's 50% of the money. What we tried to do to the extent that we could is focus objectives. So the PC strand line, once they delivered everything that we needed for the PC strand line, we gave them an incentive. So it wasn't, I'm going to put concrete on the floor over there. If I don't need the concrete on the floor over there, don't focus on it. And this helped us align them how we wanted. 20% budget buffer. This was realization insisted on this, and they were absolutely correct. We needed to have a buffer to deal with emergencies, with firefighting. There was definitely times when it was hard to take 20% and just leave it there and not use it. 20% in a project this size could have meant another 4 machines, could have meant a lot of things that we wanted, but we had to be constrained and leave that there without touching it. The third rule was to define our structure. This was off-site, which EMCO Cables has always been on one site. We've never had separate sites, so managing the project, having an on-site implementer, having the correct steering team is very important in making decisions quickly. It was challenging because, as I mentioned before, we have 3 main administrators. That's it. We don't have more people, so these people have to deal with the financing. We have to deal with decision-making, the purchasing of the machines. Are we buying the right machines? Are we going to sell the product to the right markets? Do we have enough customers? We don't want to rely just on one customer. What if that customer goes bankrupt or God knows? These are the 8 initial streams which we looked at. So you have new machines and equipment, public services, construction, moving the machines. There was a few machines that we want to take from the original plant and move to the new plant. So this meant disassembly. We refurbished them and sent them to the new plant. HR plan, 100 people from scratch, training them. This is from administration all the way down to the operators of the machines. Raw material, this part was particularly challenging for me because we buy raw steel, high carbon steel, which is an expensive product in itself to have sitting around. So I can't have the luxury of having 2 months inventory sit there if the machines aren't running. Then again, I can't have customer orders promise 100% due date delivery and not have raw material. There's no high carbon production in Colombia, so I have to import all the raw materials. It's about a 2 to 3 month lead time from the time I place an order to the time I receive the product. So it was very challenging to manage that. Other services, water treatment plant, some electrical installations that we needed. And then the final one was installation and commissioning of the machinery. This is how we started originally. We defined the full kits for streams, not construction, but IT, software, HR. This was what we changed. It was still too much WIP for management to handle 8 different streams, so we went to 2 different main streams, PC strand and then the galvanizing line. We staggered the streams, as I was mentioning, to reduce this WIP even further. This allowed us to identify long lead times, as I mentioned before, the environmental permits, which weren't at the top of our minds when we started the project. Became a huge concern when we realized that they would take 6 months. Transformer lead time, also 6 months. We were able to identify these key items which would have held us with the machines ready to go, the operators standing with their arms crossed if we hadn't had them approved. Benefits of these full kits. We were forced to finalize the design quickly. Initially we had a first design, and then we thought, we'll do rewrites as we go, but this was eliminated, and we really sat down and finalized what we wanted, how we wanted, where we wanted, so we could begin the 2 separate streams. Forced our vendor selection. We reduced the number of vendors. We bought all the machines from one vendor. So there was a few selections, all of them very good equipment. Not an easy choice, but we finally went with one vendor, so there would be reduced handoffs. We would have more leverage with this vendor of machines to be able to negotiate when they could have the machines and align them with our priorities. So we placed all the orders on day 1. And after we full kitted and staggered, we decided, okay, well, only make the PC strand ones. Don't worry about the galvanizing line. Make the PC strand line, and then worry on the other ones. And that's how we'll manage our priorities. And they've also been with us every step of the way in the installation and commissioning, which has been challenging as well. Identified the issue with the environmental permit, machine arrival sequence, which I just mentioned. All these things were important, and because we full kitted, we did a construction full kit, we did an installation full kit, and we did a commissioning full kit. Those were the main 3 full kits, which each of those full kits was almost like a project. It wasn't just having all the parts arrive at once. It was permits, approvals, installation. If I don't have electricity, there was times when when I had to bring in a generator because the electricity wasn't ready. I mean, literally we had to bring in the power grid from a mile away and do it ourselves to bring in the power to our substation. And it wasn't ready on time, but the machines were ready for installation, so we had to bring in huge generators for 2 weeks at additional cost to get this project up and running and get the machines running 2 weeks ahead of time. Arrivals like the pumps. When we identified these issues, we were generally able to work around them. Some of them weren't easy, some of them were. The generator issue I mentioned before was tough. Santa Marta, where we located the plant, has a population of about 500,000, and it's a resort town. It's not an industrial powerhouse. So finding a generator to move a 20-ton machine wasn't very easy. Here we have the 2 lines that we created, the two streams. As you can see, PC line, construction and services, installation, commissioning, and then the project buffer at the end. Then we have the galvanizing line, construction, installation, and commissioning, and project buffer at the end. This was a little tricky because there's a lot of dependencies between the 2 lines. The floors, there's a lot of pathways in the floors which carry pipes, tubes, air, compressed air, gas, and these are shared. Also, the water treatment facility, the washing line to wash the raw material is shared. So separating them completely is almost impossible, but where we could focus only on the PC line, we focused only on the PC line, and then did the galvanizing line later. The refocus that we did, as I mentioned, move everybody to the PC line. This also, not just taking focus away from the galvanizing line, but everything. No offices, no labs, nothing. Only the production line. So we brought in containers for offices, and right now I still have containers for offices. The line is running, but management and the admin is working from an air-conditioned container while they finish the offices. The labs, we decided we would fly out test samples from Santa Marta to Bogota every day to be tested, even if it's at an extra cost. And a bunch of other work around the washing phase. The raw material, one of the reasons we set up in the port is that it's, PC strand, to give you an example, of finished product, give or take, it's $1,000 a ton. Transport of raw material to Bogota and out is $150. So it basically eats up all of your margin. So that's why we decided to put the plant and the export on the export side near the port. Well, sometimes we had to send the raw material from Bogota to Santa Marta just because the washing wasn't ready. Because we said, leave the washing alone. If it takes 3 weeks, we'll eat up those 3 weeks during installation and commissioning. We don't need that much raw material. It's going to cost us. But in the end, we saved 3 weeks. The throughput generated by those 3 weeks is well worth the cost of having to take the raw material and back and sending wire samples on airplanes. Every cost analysis that we did was based on throughput. So if something saved us a week, we figured how much throughput it would generate. And even if that cost seemed insane at the time, and some of them did seem a little crazy, we made the decision and we went ahead and did it. And that's what the 20% budget project buffer was for, and that's what it was used for expediting. Contractors were given incentives for these aggressive durations. As I mentioned before, we focused all the contractors on the PC line, and they had incentives to finish early. Also, the general contractor, which was a challenge to really get them on board with the methodology, they, towards the end, accepted that for every day that they turned in the project early, they would have a bonus. So they were supposed to do it in 9 months, and they're finishing it in 7 months. So for every day, we gave them a bonus. And that's how we ended up working with them and having their measurements put. What's important to take away from this slide, I've gone over the other things, but that we added a 50% time buffer in the end. We started with 1/3. We reduced WIP even more, made aggressive durations a little bit more aggressive, and then added the 20% project buffer. That was how we constructed the phase. I mentioned this before, the project vendors, how we got them on board, how we put their measurements, how we aligned their measurements with what we really wanted, PC first, then galvanized. The project team structure. I can't emphasize enough, and I'm sure all of you who have been through an implementation and those of you who are going to go through an implementation, how important it is to have the human capital available. Management is without a doubt the most important resource that we have. This we learned not only during the project but during the implementation of TOC on the plant floor. Having people buy in, having people believe, and having the right people at the right time there to make the decisions can make all the difference on a successful implementation or not. If you take 3 or 4 days to make a decision, sometimes that really, it adds up tremendously to your final objective, to your final goal. So the right structure is very important. Steering team here was 2 people. Myself on MCO cable side, and on the contractor side, the head contractor, also the president of the board was there as well. We were there to resolve conflicts, resolve bottlenecks. We met twice a week. Tried to meet twice a week. If we couldn't meet, we had a teleconference to get issues resolved. On-site execution lead. The on-site execution lead, we started with somebody who wasn't familiar with our product, who didn't work for the company. We started with somebody who was recommended to us, somebody local. This was a mistake in multiple ways. You need somebody there who's familiar with your process. You need somebody there who knows what you're going to make, who knows what the finished product should look like, who knows what a machine to make wire does, who knows that you need certain pressure to make the wash work well. Little things like this. But if you have that person there, they're able to make the decision quickly. They don't have to wait and call and wait till the steering team meets 2 days later and ask them, which was the case the first 2 months. That's how we did it, and it was a mess. We eventually got rid of this person, and we brought in somebody from Bogota, from our company, and we sent him out there, and it made a huge difference. He did a great job. He knew what he was doing. He's been with us for many years, and he knew who our vendors were. He knew what the product is. He knew who the customers were. So this is all very important. We have task managers. Daily task management, also very important. We created a structure which was some complaints, some of the on-site residents, the electrical resident, the concrete structure resident, some complained that it was very monotonous, and it was. It is very monotonous, but it works. It's a routine, and these routines make sure that you really are validating your results. So here we had a morning walk around. So in the morning, the on-site lead would walk around the construction site. That's the first thing he would do, and make sure that the right resources were in place on the right priorities. Then he would go to the container and make sure that all the other right resources for HR, for IT, for everything that we needed were assigned to the right areas. Afternoon walk around after lunch, make sure that any conflicts that arose during the morning were taken care of. First on the job site and then back in the container, making sure that if HR had some problem with the healthcare people, that he would help them out with anything that they needed, resolving issues. In the evening, a task manager meeting. The task manager meeting was a bit of a challenge at first. These are all residents. We had to basically teach a bunch of very good but tough job site residents to adhere to these rules. They've been building for a long time. A lot of people didn't like to be told how they should operate their job site, and on some level they're correct. We were just trying to help, but it's a tough balance between telling them, you really need to focus on this, drop what you're doing here. And they say, but I have the workers there. What do you mean I'm going to stop what you're doing there, even if they have to sit idle for a while, but focus on this. This is the critical chain. And a little bit different to some of the other engineering processes that have been implemented over the years. This isn't something that we're going to repeat. This was a one-time project, so it was hard for them to adhere to it. At the end of the day, they update the tasks and the buffer management run, and this would give us a clear direction on where to go the next day. Our results, similar projects, well-managed and documented projects in Colombia who have started greenfield projects, 11 months. We planned, our aggressive duration was to do it in 6 months, and I'm very happy to say that next week we should start production. We started around March 15th from scratch. So we're very happy with the results. We had two main problems. The red that you see on the screens In the beginning, we made a decision to raise the plant 1 meter because it rains heavily during rainy season where we are, and we didn't want that to affect obviously our production or any water to get into the plant or there would be any issues. So we raised a 200,000 square foot facility 1 meter. That took about 3 to 4 weeks, and we didn't foresee that happening. And it was a suggestion that came that was given to us, and well, we're very glad we did it because it's been raining nonstop for a month. It actually has slowed us down 2 weeks on the installation and commissioning. The second part, the other red part you see, the installation and commissioning, was several issues. The rain, for example. Since we stopped everything else, we were producing with no walls. Literally, I had cement blocks up to here. I still don't have all the walls. Cement blocks up to here, and the rest was open because we really focused on getting the PC line up and running. And at the end of the day, obviously you don't want the rain getting in, but our goal was to produce. Our goal was to produce, to get the project started, to start generating cash, so we weren't just burning through it in 7 months. So the tests, the trials, the installation, and commissioning was all done without walls. So then we had a few other problems with the machines, not related to the rain. The rain actually set us back maybe a week or two, but we've had some other problems commissioning the machines, which in any industrial startup is somewhat normal. The vendor has been extremely cooperative. Since we bought all the machines from one vendor, it was a very big order, very important to them. And we picked up the phone, and they put 5 people on an airplane, and they've been there with us day and night, weekends, Sundays, trying to get these machines running. And it looks like next week we're going to start production. Implementation team, they're not here with me. I wish they all could have come, but we're in the last week of getting the machines up and running. Andres Gonzalez, who is the on-site implementer we brought him from Bogota to Santa Marta. Absolutely great. He really came through for us. Luis Felipe Serrano, who's our plant manager. We gave him responsibility and authority to make any on-site decisions he deemed necessary. He's been with the company for 35 years. He knows how to make our product. He knows what we need. He knows how the machines work. He's purchased machines. He's built water treatment plants. He knows. The importance of this is huge, getting people to the right people with the right responsibility and giving them the authority. The contractors work great. As I mentioned, I wouldn't change them for the world. Steering team was myself, Maria Eugenia Peña, who was the head contractor. She was in charge of the construction and all the infrastructure of the plant necessary. And I want to give a special thank you to the realization team, my implementers, Pankaj and David. They did a really good job, and were always there when we needed them.
All right, well, let's give it up for Felipe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Felipe, hang on a second.